In the last lecture, you learned how to set styles dynamically. In the end, you learned you simply use JavaScript to manipulate whatever you then bind to the style property. Now, class name, of course, also can be set dynamically, like here for the app. But we can also introduce a new class to have something to play around. So we could, for example, say that we want to change something in our code here. Let's say this paragraph here, this is really working, depending on whether our list of persons has 3 elements, as it does have at the beginning, or less. So maybe we want to color the text red. So I will add a new class, which I'll name red, a normal CSS class, where I set the color red. And this will, of course, affect the text color. And maybe we even want to make it bold. So I'll name a class or create a class named bold. The name is up to you. If we are at 1 element left. So font weight bold. I got 2 new CSS classes. These are available globally, but right now I'm not using any. I now want to set the class name of this paragraph dynamically depending on the length of the elements in my persons array here. Below 2 or less elements, I should say, turn it red. 1 and less, red and bold. So to do that, I of course also need to adjust the classes or the class name I set to this paragraph dynamically. So what I'll do is I'll create a new variable here, which I'll name classes, and the name is totally up to you, where I in the end will create an array of strings. This is one way of doing that. Here I will add red and bold. And these are just the class names I defined here, red and bold, without the dot, just the class name. I will then call join here and join them with an empty space. This will turn this array of strings into one string, which is in the end just red bold. This is what we'll get in the end. This is a valid CSS class list we can assign to class names. And of course I could have created this manually, but I will soon edit this array dynamically, which is why I want to have a generic solution. I can now go to this paragraph and add class name. And of course I don't have to bind this to a string as I do here. I can also bind this dynamically with single curly braces to the classes variable I have, which, keep in mind, is just a string joined with an empty space. If I now save this, and make sure you also saved the app CSS file, now let's go back to the application, and it's red and bold, right from the start without us touching any persons. That sounds a bit weird, but you know what I mean. So it's red right from the start because we always assign these classes. Now we can add some dynamic nature to that. We only want to do that if it's less than 1 person, otherwise it should be red if it's less than 2, or less and equal actually. And if we have all 3 persons, none of these classes should be attached. So let me actually do something else. I'll remove the join statement here and set classes to an empty array. And then I will simply add an if statement here. And if this state person's length is smaller or equal than 2, so only 2 or less persons left, I will take classes, this variable, and actually let is just the ES6 version of var, but we can use const here because I'm never assigning a new value. So if this is less than 2, I will call push, the normal JavaScript push method, to push the red class onto this array. So at this point of time, classes will be red, like this. I also will add another if check, where I will say if state person's length is smaller or equal than 1, and please note, this is no else if condition, it's just another if statement or if check coming after the first one because I want to run both. So if it's even smaller or equal than 1, then I will reach out to classes again and push another class, the bold class. So at this point of time, classes is red and it's also bold. Now, if we have only 2 elements in the persons array, we will just have red, and we will skip this because this condition here will be false. Now we got an array of classes which might look like this, or be an empty array if we have all three elements. So I want to assign it here, and classes like this won't work anymore because now it's an array. We need to pass a string here though. Well, I can simply call join with an empty space in between, so a white space character on classes here when I assign it. I could of course also do this prior to this and store it in a new variable. With that, I'm now assigning a string, which is simply my joined array, either nothing, either just red, or red and bold with a white space in between. And now with that, let me save this and go back. If it now reloads, it's a black text by default. Now let's toggle the persons and let's remove one. Now it's red, but not bold. If I remove another one, now it's also bold. And now if I remove a third one, it stays like this, obviously. This is showing how you can also dynamically edit and assign classes. And I can't emphasize it enough. Everything is just JavaScript. So you work with your array of classes here as you do with a normal array, because it is a normal array in normal JavaScript. And all you do in the end here is you have to make sure that you actually assign a string, as we do here with the join method. And of course, you could have whatever logic you need to construct an array of classes or get a string with CSS classes by other means without joining an array. Whatever you have. Maybe take some user input, which is a string by default. You can assign anything which is a valid string to class name, and it will then be handled as a list of CSS classes, which hopefully meet the classes you set up in your CSS file. So with that, you learned how to dynamically assign styles and edit them, and dynamically assign and edit classes.